Hey guys, what's up? It's Ruben here, and welcome back to my YouTube show. So today I'm going to talk about the two largest communist empires, which were China and USSR, or present-day Russia. So first I'm going to talk about USSR, and then next I'm going to talk about China, the two largest communist empires. And the People's Republic of China still remains to this day, which is also based on communist to this day, since it was established in 1949 when the Communist Party of Mao Zedong took over China in October of 1949. So first I'm going to talk about USSR and before USSR and the Russian Revolution. So you see, the idea of communism came from Karl Marx, who was this German philosopher. He received his PhD. He received his PhD. He received his PhD, and he wrote a book which was called Das Kapital, which is basically the book of which is basically a book based on history. And so he came up with some ideas, and then he combined it combined it socialism and capitalism, and that formed communism. And then he began to realize that this workers need to destroy the capitalists because they were like this evil people, according to Marx. And so he combined those two political theories together, and that's how communism was formed. So, and then like before Russian Revolution, I think it was some of it was um, it was this Russian revolutionary Vladimir Lenin and the other group of Bolsheviks. They read the book of Das Kapital, and they came up with their own ideas about like create a revolution in Russia. And so that's what happened during that time when the Bolsheviks under Lenin and the rest of them read the books about it, and they decided to come up with an idea to create a revolution in the Russian Empire. And some of the members who believed in this Marxism and in this communist, they were basically exiled from Russia, like Vladimir Lenin was in 1897, because he was a senior Marxist who believed in Marxism because he read the books of Marxism. And so he was exiled, and a bunch of other Bolshevik members were exiled from Russia. And so some of them went to Western Europe, like Germany, Switzerland, I believe. They were exiled there because they were believers in Karl Marx, who was a German philosopher. And then later on, it was during 1917. That was the year of the Russian Civil War. No, not Russian Civil War. That was during the time of World War One, and that was when the Russian Empire was on the edge of collapse because of the Russian troops were dying in World War One, and so a lot of and people were mad at the Nicholas, who was the Tsar of Russia, the Emperor of Russia. And so a lot of people were angry at him because he got Russia involved into the war. And so he wanted to take out, and then he took out troops from Russia, took out troops from the German Empire, because the Russians were fighting against the Germans in World War One. And so the Germans gave the Communist Party of Russia, or what would later be known as the Soviet Union, they would give the Germans the Germans would give the Russians money so they could create a revolution, so they could get Russia out of the war. And so that was the Germans' plans, because they wanted Russia to get out of the war, stay out of World War One, basically. And so under the leadership, he said the Germans gave Lenin and the Bolsheviks money so they could travel to Russia. And that was the same time when the February Revolution happened of 1917, which was 102 years ago. That was when the February Revolution happened in the Russia, and the Russian government was overthrown during that period. And then months, and then I think it was Russian people wanted bread at the same time, and they wanted to have bread. They wanted bread to eat, and so the Bolsheviks basically told the Russians that we will give you bread, we will give you this and stuff. But in reality, they lied to the people, and that's what communists do. They lie to people all the time. And so later on, that was the same time in October of 1917. That was when the Second Russian Revolution happened, when the Bolsheviks stormed the Winter Palace in Moscow. That was when they took control of the newspapers, the power plant, basically everything. They took over, and they took over the government, and a bunch of authorities of the Tsarist government of Nicholas were arrested. Nicholas the Third, I believe it was. And so a bunch of authorities of Nicholas were arrested, and they were put into jail because they were against the Bolsheviks. And so that was on November 7th of 1917, because the revolution happened on November 7th, 1917, but on the old calendar it was October 25th, 1917. So it happened in November. And so the Russian Empire it basically collapsed because the Russian Revolution, because the communists took over, led by Vladimir Lenin, Trotsky, and Stalin. And so after the revolutions in 1917, a war would last. That would be the Russian Civil War, and that would last for about 5 years, from 1917 all the way to 1922, when the Bolsheviks won the war against the Tsar, against the Russians, against the White Army, who were anti-communist. They were supporters of capitalism, and so that war would last for about 5 years. And so Lenin and the Bolsheviks managed to kill Nicholas along with his family, because Nicholas was hiding from the Bolsheviks. And so that was on July 17th, 1918. Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks killed Nicholas's family, and somewhere in Russia, on the Soviet Russia at the time. So that it didn't become Soviet Union during that time. It would later become U.S.S.R. in 1922, when the communists won the war against the capitalist forces, which was known as the White Army. And so after that, it was by 1922. That was the same time when the Bolsheviks, or the Communist Party of Russia, or later Soviet Union, won the war under Vladimir Lenin, and the White Army was defeated. And so Soviet Union was established on December 30th, 1922. And then if you see, by 1917, Russia had an opportunity to choose freedom, but it didn't, but instead, this communists and Lenin, they decided to choose communism, which was way different, a different opportunity they had. They had other opportunities to pick what was the future for Russia, and they decided to keep communism. And so by 1924, Stalin became the absolute ruler of USSR, because that was when Comrade Lenin died on January 21st, 1921. And so he would be the dictator of USSR for about 30 years, for 3 decades. He would be the dictator of USSR. And so during his time, there was a lot of there was like a famine going on in Ukraine. A lot of people were killed in Ukraine during his rule, and that was also when the Great Purges took place, which killed over probably like 30 million people of his Stalin's own people, and they were killed because they were against him. Some of Stalin's generals were against him, and so some of his generals got killed basically. That were and his guys in the Politburo who were against Stalin were killed also. So it was a very, very disgusting time to live under the Stalin era. And so it was a very terrible time. And so by 1929, that was when World War II started. That was when Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union signed an agreement that they would invade Poland together. And they would have the East would go to the U.S.S.R. and then the West would go to the Nazi occupation. And so by this September 1st, 1939, that was when Nazi Germany invaded Poland, and then 16 days later, that was September 17th, 1939. That was when the U.S.S.R. invaded the Poland, and so that would come under both the Soviet and Nazi occupation. And that would last for about 2 years. And then 2 years later, the Nazi Germany would betray USSR's or Stalin's ally, or Stalin's ally. And so Nazi Germany betrayed the Soviet Union. They were friends because they signed an agreement and they agreed to occupy Poland together. And so on June 22nd, 1941, Nazi Germany attacked the USSR, Soviet Union. And so that shocked the Stalin because Stalin thought they were friends. They were allies, basically. And so that Stalin didn't speak on the radio for a long time. And then I think it was for about maybe 2 weeks later, he went on the radio and he said, "We must fight against the German fascists. We must fight them." The German fascists. That's what he basically said on radio when he addressed the Soviet people. And so that war would last for about that war would last the Eastern Front, which was the front between USSR and USSR and Nazi Germany, and the Western Front was basically that was thought between like Nazi Germany, the United Kingdom, and the United States. And so that was what the Western Front was about. And so that war would last. The Eastern Front would last for about 4 years, from 1941 all the way to 1945. And so that would be like two separate wars, because the Second World War started. The Second World War started in 1939, and then the war in the East, or the Eastern Front, began in 1941 when USSR was attacked by Nazi Germany. And so during that time, it was by October of 1941, that was when Nazi Germany attacked Moscow. And so Stalin refused to leave the city because he wanted to stay and defend the city against the German invaders. And so some of the Soviets went to Siberia so they could create their own weapons. They had factories there. And so they created their weapons like tanks and guns and stuff. And so they went back to Moscow and then they defeated all the Germans. They pushed all the Germans back from Moscow all the way to Berlin. And so later on, I think that was at the Battle of Kursk. That was when the Russians started pushing back the Germans, the Nazis, from Russia. And there would be many other battles there in the Soviet Union during that period, like the Battle of Leningrad, Stalingrad, and this Battle of Kiev, I think. And so they would start pushing back the Germans from USSR. And so by 1945, 1944, that was when we really started winning the war. That was when the Allies were starting to win the war. That was when we were pushing the Germans back from the Europe. and so Russians started pushing them back, and then they defeated the Germans all the way in 1945, because that was when the Russians won the war against the Nazis in at the Battle of Berlin, and that was when the war in Europe came to an end in 1945 with the suicide of Adolf Hitler and the surrender of Nazi Germany in May of 1945. And so after the war, after the war was the Cold War, in which the Soviet Union and the United States were no longer allies. That was when they became enemies, because they were spying on each other, basically, which is called espionage, like spying to obtain military secrets. And so Soviet Union and the United States, they became no longer allies. And so for about 40 years, the world was on the fear of nuclear war, because a nuclear war would probably most likely happen, but it didn't happen during the Cold War time, and hopefully it never will happen in the future, hopefully. And so during that period, the world, and so for 40 years, that's how long the Cold War was going on. And so for about 40 years, the Cold War would go on, and then by 1991, that was the time when USSR dissolved, because communism started to collapse in the Eastern countries, or the Eastern Bloc countries. And then USSR came down, and then the USSR became known as the Russian Federation. And then so the United States is the only superpower to this day, which still remains this day. Only United States is the only superpower of the world, because it has power. It has like weapons and nukes and stuff. So that's why it's called a superpower, not like a superhero that has powers or whatever. Okay, so now I am going to talk about the People's Republic of China, the second largest communist country after the USSR. So So if you remember, by the 1940s, because that was when this World War II was going on, and there was a struggle for power over China. It was between the Chinese and the Japanese, because they were fighting against each other, because the Chinese were allies with the United States, the U.S.S.R, Soviet Union, or Britain, and the Japan was allies, were a member of the Axis, which were like Germany, and Italy. The Japanese were allies with the Germans, and so there was a struggle for power over China, and so the communist forces and the nationalist forces that helped China fight against the Japanese, and they kicked the Japanese's asses. And after the World War II, and there was also a struggle in China, like between the nationalists and communists. And so after World War II, the communist under Mao Zedong took power in China, and so they managed to take power in China, and so and then the Chinese government, or the nationalist government of China, managed to leave China, and now the government of China, the original government in China, or the Republic of China, is located in Taiwan. That's where the capitalist government of China is to this day still, which still remains there today. And so Mao was basically like the chairman of the Communist Party of China, and so his nickname was called Chairman Mao. So Chairman Mao, he was also a librarian who also studied the readings of Karl Marx. He was a devoted supporter, devoted supporter, Lenin was in Marx. And so he started to follow the steps of Leninism and Marxism and all that other stuff. And so later on he would carry out this cultural revolution, which was basically to get rid of this capitalist ideas in China, to get rid of the capitalists. And so that's what his plan was. He wanted to wipe out capitalism from China. He wanted to kill any capitalist in China. And I think it was about maybe 50 million capitalists were killed or something that supported capitalism. And so that Cultural Revolution started in 1966, and that would end, I think it was between 1971 or 1976. So that meant it lasted for about 10 years. And it was also very similar because, like in U.S.S.R, they had like this 5-year plans, which was basically like to produce more cars, to produce more houses, to produce more apartment buildings, basically. And so they had the same thing in China, basically, the 5-year plans, which was to increase the productivity and to create more cars, factories, and basically that. So those were basically like the 5-year plans. They had that in Soviet Union and they had that in China. And so because it was a planned economy in those two countries, in Soviet Union and the China. And so by I think it was between the late 50s or early 60s, because that was when Soviet Union and China were no longer friends. They were no longer allies because the Soviet Union refused to give China the secrets of how to build a nuclear bomb or an atomic bomb or a nuclear missile. And so the Chinese got pissed at the Soviet Union. Mao got pissed at Khrushchev because Khrushchev refused to give Mao the secrets of how to build a nuclear missile or nuclear or atom bomb. And so they became mad at each other, and they were basically no longer friends. Which the USSR and the USSR and China were allies during the Stalin and the Joseph Stalin and the Mao Zedong era. And so they became mad at each other, and they were no longer allies. And so later on, I think it was between 1960s, they also Chinese also managed to build their own atomic bomb, and they managed to test it. So you see, basically, like USSR and China are very same in the same way because they're communists, and they didn't have any religion in China because it was an atheist state, like Soviet Union, North Korea, Vietnam, I believe, and the other communist countries out there to this day. And so, if you say anything bad about the leader, you would get arrested and you would get punished in the jail. You would be in jail for a very long time. The same thing like in North Korea and the former USSR. So you really had to be careful about what you say about the leaders in the country. You couldn't just go out in the public and just yell out loud because the police force may arrest you and the nation. So that was kind of like the horrifying thing basically in that period. So I hope you enjoyed this video. So please drop a like and subscribe, and more history videos on whatever will come soon. So have a great day, and thanks for watching.